So my name is Patrick Lauke. I work as Web Evangelist for Opera Software. So as a big part of my job, I basically go around, I play around with new technology, try to understand it myself, not being the best JavaScripter in the world either. I know enough JavaScript to be dangerous, usually to myself. So I play around with it, and I try to make cool things. So hopefully I'll show you some of the things that excite me personally about the new possibilities that we get now that we have native multimedia capabilities inside the browser itself with HTML5. Or really, how to make your pages cool with all the new stuff like video and audio and canvas. So, jumping straight in there with the video element. So, over the years, I don't know, I've been doing web pages for probably about 15, 16 years now. And when multimedia came around and people started to want to include multimedia into their pages, there have been lots of solutions over the years. Who here has played with like real audio, real video, that sort of stuff? Anybody? Yeah. A few people. We'll have a support group meeting later about that. But really, fundamentally, the format that's won over the years with the various kind of plugin technologies trying to get into the browser is really Flash. Flash has become the de facto standard, if you will, even today, for delivering multimedia inside your web pages. And it's a great technology. I'm not dissing Flash at all. It was very much needed because it really brought the web forward in terms of going from static kind of pages to real web experiences, real multimedia stuff. But from a coding point of view, it's not the nicest. This is the kind of shit that you have to deal with, basically, if you're using Flash. I wouldn't want to code this sort of thing by hand myself. This, luckily, is what YouTube regurgitates back at you when you say, yes, I love the video of the skateboarding kitten. I want that on my blog. You press the button, you take this code, you don't try to understand it, cargo code, you take it, paste it in, and it works. And yes, it's great. But really, as a web developer, if you want to start kind of including stuff, there should be an easier way to do things like that, including video in your pages or audio, etc. And HTML5 gives us that possibility. So going from something like that, HTML5 gives us something that's a lot saner in many ways, a video element. In its simplest form, this is all you need to do to basically include video in your pages. Similar to what you would do, for instance, with images, we've got now the matching element for video inside our pages as well. Of course, this is only the absolute minimum version. There are many more attributes that you can define if you want to include video in your pages. You can define, for instance, should the browser actually show default controls. Every browser has its own kind of look and feel when you include video, but fundamentally you're saying, yes, the browser should have the play button and the volume and everything else. It should provide that. You can piss off all your users by having your video autoplay as soon as they get to your page. Great stuff. You can start it off muted. You can loop it. You can hint at the browser what it should do in terms of preloading the video, for instance. You could say, don't preload anything. So if you're expecting loads of people hitting your page, you want to avoid that. Every time somebody hits it, it makes a request to the server. Your server starts kind of churning out data. But you only want to actually send the data when the user explicitly plays the video. You could say, don't preload anything. You could say to the browser, you should preload enough so that you know what the video is about, how wide, how high it is, just to get the metadata. Or you could say to the browser, basically, do whatever your auto behavior would be. On desktop, that usually means the browser will start to buffer quite a bit of video so that as soon as the user hits play, it will start up immediately. On mobile devices, because obviously video works also on the latest mobile browsers, mobile devices will be a lot more conservative in most cases. Unless you're on a Wi-Fi in most cases, they will actually, their auto behavior is do not grab anything over the network, because obviously it could be quite expensive for the user if they're paying per kilobyte, megabyte, whatever. So they will really only start preloading when the user explicitly has requested that particular video. So that's the auto behavior. You can define a poster image, similar to if you've played around with, say, QuickTime. You can, inside a QuickTime movie, actually define what frame is the poster image. By default, if you don't provide a poster image, browsers will just try and grab the first frame of the video, obviously if they've loaded a little bit off it, the metadata, and they'll show that. But if your video starts off with, say, a black frame, the user will just see a black box with a play button. Not ideal. So you could actually create your own poster image, and the browser will show that before the user actually then clicks play to start playing the video. Width and height, obviously, similar to what you would do with images. And most importantly, because it's got an opening and closing element, you can also have fallback content inside it. So for older browsers that do not support the video element natively, you can, at the very least, have a link or, sucks to be you, upgrade, but at least a link that says, your browser can't play the video, at least you can download it. Maybe the user can play it with something like VLC or whatever that they've got locally on their own machine. So what does that give us? Why is it so exciting that we now have video element in our browser? Beyond the code is a lot simpler. Well, the one advantage of the video element is that as a native object inside the browser, it's the browser itself that handles how the video is played, how it's displayed, which gives us a lot of cool new things that we can do. First of all, it will treat it exactly as any other HTML element in your page. So anything you want to do, we've seen all those CSS transforms and everything else, you can do that as a matter of course with a video element as well. You can do things like, light boxes, fading opacity, all of that sort of stuff that you can do normally, all the cool effects that you can do now with CSS, you can apply them to your video as well. Rounded corners to the actual video itself. It's all possible because the actual browser is doing all the rendering. If you tried previously to do things like, if you had a Flash movie and you want to have a light box that goes over it, there can be problems in terms of the Flash being always in front of things. There are fixes for it. There have been fixes over the years. But many lightbox scripts, for instance, still today, what they do is they try, if there is an object anywhere in the page, they hide those objects first before a lightbox comes up just to avoid those kinds of issues. With native video, because it's the browser that's actually handling that, you don't have any of those problems. And also keyboard accessibility. Whenever you've got a plugin to absolutely simplify the matter monstrously, you're saying to the browser, here's something, it's a black box. The browser doesn't actually try to understand what's going on inside that black box. It delegates any event handlers and any kind of the drawing of that particular area in the page to whatever the plugin is. So it might be Flash DLL if you're on a Windows machine, etc. And that can cause problems, for instance, for users that are using the keyboard to navigate through pages. There might be the extreme case, blind users with screen readers, but even somebody who can see the screen but they can't use a mouse. If you're using the keyboard, in many cases, Flash still has the issue today that users can't tab into a particular Flash movie. And if they somehow manage to get into the movie, usually they're trapped inside it and they can't tab back out. Again, that's an issue that with video being rendered directly by the browser, with the browser handling, say, the controls as well, that issue pretty much goes away. So as a really quick example, so I'll keep popping backwards and forwards from my presentation to the browser, since I'm not a cool kid that's got his presentation in the browser. I know, shocking. Just to give you an example, oops, go away. Just a bare bones, here's a video element. I've also applied some really naff CSS transform transition here. So as the video is playing, I can kind of go in and out of it. Hang on, I've focused it. And also, if I'm using the keyboard, you'll notice I can actually just go into it. I can use the keyboard to change things without any issues at all. So as an example, with Flash, these things are not always that easy to implement because, as I said, what's happening there, the video playing, keyboard events going into it is usually handled completely in a black box environment. The browser doesn't really try to understand what's going on. Also, obviously, the one thing that's caught everybody's attention, which is why video in particular has been talked about for ages, is that there are many devices nowadays on the market, mostly beginning with an I, that don't support things like plug-in technologies, in particular Flash. So yes, it's great that with HTML5 video, we can now have video elements playing inside browsers as well. Modern browsers on mobile phones, on tablets, etc., if they've got a fairly recent browser built in, can actually handle video quite nicely, depending how it's encoded. We'll see that in a little bit. And the nice thing with HTML5 video as well is that not only do you get just the element inside your page, that's pretty boring, okay, I can put some video in there, but really, as many other things in HTML5, there's a lot of JavaScript API stuff that's defined inside the spec that you can use. Which means that even for idiots like myself, it's fairly straightforward from your JavaScript to actually influence the video, control the video with fairly self-explanatory methods like play, pause. You can read the current volume and the current time. You can set them as well, so you can jump from your JavaScript to a particular part of the video, or, I don't know, change the volume from some other part of your script. And obviously, there's also a myriad of events defined, so that if you've got a video element, you can really start to hook into all the various 100 things that can happen. Has it loaded enough data? Has it started playing? Has the user paused the video, or some other script has paused the video? Has the time changed, as in the video is playing every, I think, 100 milliseconds, although it's not quite defined, it might change by, depending on which browser you use. As the video is playing, events are continuously being fired, so you could be doing things as the video is playing. All very straightforward, but also very powerful, because it gives you really, for the first time, the option to actually, from your scripting, in a very simple way, manipulating things that happen with a video. Jump to the example. Seamless. So just to give you an idea, here's a really nice page that tries to summarize all of these various events and attributes that you can read out or set. Hopefully, if the Wi-Fi is still there. Yeah. There's a video playing. So there we go. So this is, as I said, the link to all of these things is in the slides. The slides are online, and there is annoying audio. But you can actually see all of these various events being fired, and you could hook into them, and you could actually do clever things with them. You know exactly how much has been buffered, has the data started loading from the server, and everything else. So jumping back to the browser, I'll show you some quick examples with my very limited JavaScript capabilities. So I've got a video element here. As I said, you won't learn anything new JavaScript-wise. In fact, you might actually correct my fairly horrible JavaScript. But just to give you an idea, I've got a video element there, and I left the controls on just so we can see what's going on. But I've also completely outside of the video element, I've just defined 2 buttons and a little range slider here, another HTML5 thing. And really just hooking into the methods of the video element, I can start, sending the play method or triggering the pause method. You'll see the time here is changing because as the video is playing, an event is always being fired, which I just use then to show what is the current time set. I can change the volume, so if I go, I don't know, down to here, you'll see that the volume has actually changed. All fairly straightforward stuff. As I said, this is not rocket science, and that's the point. It's a very simple kind of JavaScript, and you can start to do interesting things with video. Now, as I said, this won't win any awards in any coding or design contests. But the interesting thing is that obviously with the same capabilities, with the same knowledge that you've got today, a little bit of CSS, a few images, and everything else, a little bit of JavaScript, you can actually start to build in a fairly quick and easy way simple, nice custom controls for video as well. So this is all using, I don't know, web fonts and all sorts of things. Just a bit of graphics, and you can reskin that really easily, changing your CSS. I remember back in my previous life, worked as a webmaster for a university, and all of the cool stuff like this, like a video player, we used to outsource that to some web design agency. They charged enormous amounts of money to give us a player, and then the next year, I don't know, corporate identity changes, we need to change 2 colors in the player, and they charge us again just to change that because we obviously didn't get access to the actual source files. So they made a lot of money out of that. That's basically, if you build it like this, just a little bit of CSS, using, leveraging, to use a shit term, the knowledge that you already have in terms of CSS and stuff, you can quickly and easily build your own custom controllers for audio and video. Well, we'll see audio in a minute as well. So we got that. Also, it's very easy if you know a little bit about, JavaScripting, DOM manipulation, doing things like, who remembers those gallery kind of scripts where you've got a few images, small thumbnails, you press them, and all you're doing is swapping out the source of a big image just to show different things. Well, exactly that sort of thing you can now do with video as well, which is quite refreshing. So here I've just got a video element, and by just selecting different thumbnails, all I'm really doing is just swapping out the source attributes on the video element. So again, for somebody who's been doing any more JavaScript than me, this is nothing, but it's nice and powerful that you can do that now with a few lines of JavaScript directly in your browser without having to use any extra plugins or building any special kind of Flash things around it. So yeah, basically all your old DHTML skills are cool again, and you can say I'm doing HTML5 now and get loads of money. So obviously, for those who have looked at video before, you might have already come across the problem with video formats and codecs and the evils. I think one of the first sessions this morning, there was already mention about the evils of the various codecs. And yes, of course I agree. HTML5, the specification, if you downloaded it, printed it out, put it on your night table, if you need to fall asleep at night, just read a few pages, it's great. HTML5, the spec itself, goes into a lot of detail about all these APIs, the methods and everything else, but it's completely silent about video formats. The spec itself does not mandate all browsers should support this particular format or this other particular format. A lot of people are pissed off about that. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to HTML4 or even previous versions. If you look at the image element, if you look into the old specifications, nowhere does the spec actually say browsers should support JPEG or GIF or PNG or anything else. The spec defines the element itself, the mechanism by which a browser will display an image or a video. It doesn't say anything about the formats. There are basically three, I would say two, one is kind of a legacy one, three formats that have been battling it out over the last few years since HTML5 video was introduced. MP4, which is the container format, and H.264, which is the actual codec in which the video is encoded. OGG Theora and WebM container with VP8 as the codec. Now, some browsers support one, some browsers support the other. MP4 H.264, it is a ubiquitous format. You really can't move for MP4 H.264. It's the format that's used, say, on Blu-ray DVDs. That's how the actual video stream is encoded. If you've got a digital camera that also does movies, it's very likely that it outputs MP4 H.264. It's pretty much everywhere as a format, and it's great. Problem with MP4 H.264 is there are licensing and royalty issues around it. I'm not a lawyer, thank God, but there are the wording is very grey around it. Basically, if you're making money using H.264, the MPEG-LA, which holds the patents, the patent pool for MP4 H.264, will want a cut from that. So it's a little bit dodgy ground if you, say, want to provide a professional service, you're making money off video on your website, there might be legal issues. But MP4 H.264 is supported in Chrome, Safari, and IE. Chrome did make a lot of noise about a year ago that they were going to drop support for that. Nothing's happened really, so it was a bit of saber rattling to see what's going on with the patent issues. The other format that originally, when video came out, was being bandied as the competitor to MP4 H.264, Ogtheora. It's free and open. There's no licensing fees. There are not many tools available to encode into Ogtheora, and it's not web optimized, or as I like to say in a very technical term, it's shit. It's not very good. It's not very good, but it was the only alternative at the time. There's the new competitor that came out fairly recently, well, it's about a year and a bit now, WebM with VP8 codec. Again, open and royalty-free. I think, well, it's owned by Google, but they gave it away for free to the world and said, use it, do whatever you want with it. It is web-optimized compared to Ogtheora. So when I say web-optimized, there are certain things that if you're delivering video over a network, you need to have kind of accurate timing, kind of frames and everything else. All of that is built into WebM, so it's actually built from the ground up to be a format that can be well delivered over a network. And support by hardware and software vendors is, well, there is currently some support already. More is being promised. The likes of Adobe have said, yes, we're going to start supporting that in things like even inside Flash itself or in their authoring tools, so you can actually export video, hopefully, to WebM at some point. So compared to Ogtheora, it's got all the advantages of Og, and hopefully it's got a bit more industry backing as well. So, well, we've seen WebM is supported in Chrome, Firefox, Opera. Internet Explorer, they say, well, basically they're going to use whatever codecs are installed on the platform itself, so in Windows, obviously. So if a user, for whatever reason, has already installed the WebM codec through some other piece of software, HTML5 will actually start to play WebM as well. The one big omission there, obviously, is Safari. So at the moment, really, the situation we have is Safari can only do MP4 H.264, and the other browsers, well, if you count HTML5 as well, can potentially do WebM. So there's no one format that all browsers support. So how do we get around that? Well, luckily, the HTML5 spec also defines a way of providing multiple sources to video elements. So instead of just saying video source and pointing it somewhere, you can actually start saying, okay, here's various variants of the video that I want to provide. And what you can do is you can have, say, your movie in MP4 format and WebM, and if you want to support really old versions of things like Firefox, that only play OGG rather than WebM. You could also have an OGG version in there. And basically, a browser that comes across this will, in source order, go through them one by one, and the first one that it thinks it can play, it will start to use that particular one. So, for instance, Safari will come across this, it will pick the MP4 version, great. Google will also, well, Google Chrome will also play the MP4 version, but something like Firefox or Opera will ignore the first one and jump straight to the second one and start playing the WebM version. You can also be a lot more specific, because just saying something is an MP4 or an OGG, for instance, they're only containers as such, so the codecs could still be fairly different. Particularly MP4, there's various profiles that video streams inside, and MP4 can be encoded in. So you can actually be very specific and say, this is an MP4 with, I don't know, a high quality version, high bit rate, etc., etc. So you can really be very specific about these various options. So you could potentially even have 2 or 3 versions of your MP4. One for desktop machines with really high quality, one in the quality that, say, an iPad can play, because they can't play all MP4s, and so on. These sorts of things, you know, what codec is supported, can the browser actually play? It can also be, obviously, feature detected. So there is a can play type method. And even there, same deal, you could say video WebM, or you could be very specific and say it's WebM and the codec is this. And I love the return values, which are strings, probably, maybe, and so great stuff. A lot of people then start saying, oh, I don't want to encode my videos in multiple formats, I hate that. And then I just look at things like this and go, really? So yeah, it is a pain, admittedly. If you've got loads of videos, you potentially have to encode them 3 times to make them work in all browsers. But I think the advantage of having it working in all browsers and not just saying, well, I'm just going to do an MP4 version, it's just going to be for my iPad, great. Again, we're going back to the free web, keep the web open. And to encode your videos in multiple formats, there are various tools. If you're a command line wizard, I'm not. You can use something like FFmpeg. Drag and drop solutions are there. Miro, which is actually just the front end to FFmpeg. You can actually say, I want to encode my video here for iPad or whatever. It hasn't been updated in a while, and sometimes it seems to crash recently. So, but hopefully, though, a new version will come out soon. Obviously, if you're doing a site in the wild and you still have users that are using browsers that don't support native video, you still want to actually give them an option of seeing video in your pages rather than just sucks to be you. A crazy guy by the name of Croc Cayman, and I hope that is his real name, he sounds like a Batman villain, has come up with a crazy idea of, because we can have fallback inside the video element itself, we had the old code of doing the Flash object, and he kind of Frankensteined the two together in a thing he calls video for everybody. So you can still have the video element, you can have your various sources, your MP4, your WebM, and if you're being nice to old Firefox, OGG, and then in the fallback itself, you can actually inject your Flash movie as well. The nice thing with Flash is Flash itself can read external MP4s, so at least you don't have to do a Flash video version as well. You can just repoint it to the MP4 version that you were providing for the likes of Safari. And then you could still have a fallback inside the object itself. So if the user doesn't have native video, it'll fall back to Flash. If the user then also doesn't have Flash, then at least you can give them a link to the video files themselves. Right, audio. Unsurprisingly, it's exactly the same as video. So all the things that I mentioned, obviously it hasn't got a picture, all the things I've mentioned apply to audio element as well. You could do a very minimal audio element just with a single source, pointing it to something. You can say, I want the browser to provide controls. If you don't, you basically get a kind of ethereal empty space in your page, unless you then style that away. So usually controls is what you actually want, unless you're providing, again, custom controls, which the one I showed before for my video, if you hook it up to an audio element, would work exactly the same way. So play method, pause method, current time, etc. It's all the same stuff. You can autoplay to piss off your users. And you can also provide multiple sources, because the same way as with the video element, there is also a big dispute about what codecs for audio browsers should support. And it's the same kind of battle lines. You've got MP3, practically ubiquitous format. You find MP3s everywhere. Again, MP3s have got some kind of dodgy licensing issues surrounding them. It's a bit unclear, it's a bit nebulous. And you've got OGG Vorbis on the other side of the equation, the free and open way of encoding audio. And compared to OGG Theora, OGG Vorbis isn't shit, technical term. So it's actually quite a nice variant. Most browsers, strangely enough, also support WAV, but if you're doing WAV on the open web, I'll shoot you in the face personally myself. So, quick examples. I haven't hooked up to the big speakers because the examples are fairly trivial, to be honest. So, the Wilhelm scream, beautiful. And obviously, what you can also do is, with scripting and stuff, you can actually, obviously, trigger audio elements directly from your script. So a really, really crappy example that I just did ages ago was just loads of, wind chimes. I recorded each individual chime and then just some randomized JavaScript that triggers them. And interesting enough, this works on tablets as well. I've played around with it, left it on the table, and pissed everybody off. So fairly straightforward. Again, as I said, if you know more JavaScript than one line, you can do this sort of stuff very, very easily. Also, for audio stuff there in my wind chime example, I've got the actual audio elements there, and I forced controls just so people can actually see what's going on. You don't actually need the audio element itself in your page at all, in your actual document, in your DOM structure. You can create an element that lives somewhere inside the browser's memory. Don't hook it up to anything inside your page, and it will still work. Point it to a source. So before you point it to a source, you could do a can play type and work out, does the browser support OGG, or does it support MP3 with exactly the same kind of way, and then inject whichever source is most appropriate, and then you can just trigger the play event. Weirdly enough, this works for video as well, although I've not come across a use case where you'd want to create a video that's actually not on the page. But you at least hear the audio. I've tried it before. So it does work in a crazy way. And then lastly, Canvas. I haven't got a lot of time, and I'll only cover it really briefly. So Canvas, hopefully you've all played with Canvas already. We've seen great examples throughout the day. Things like actual games and everything else. But for the uninitiated, Canvas, scriptable images, basically an empty canvas on your page and loads of JavaScript APIs to actually do very boring drawings in terms of 3D stuff. Well, not 3D stuff, sorry, 2D drawing. We're not going into WebGL, so Bezier curves, lines, and everything else. And you can do really, really naff things like, as I went a bit crazy at some point playing with Canvas, things like this. You draw things, you react to mouse events, or slightly more advanced. Somebody did mention, well, I think 2 or 3 people mentioned processing.js. This actually uses processing.js to draw nice things. So you can draw shapes and lines and everything else with the default API methods. Interesting thing as well, though, which makes Canvas quite useful, particularly for things like games, is that you can also draw ready-made images directly on Canvas. So either external files, or they might actually already be on your page. You just grab the data, the image data itself, and you can then put it back onto the canvas, or manipulate that data, put it back, which basically results in naff things like this. So yes, I am a games programmer. I'm still not rich from it because my skill isn't that good. But yeah, basically loads of images, move them around, and you can actually do things like games and all sorts of things. More interesting kind of applications. Actually, I'm not going to go there until I actually talk about it. That would help. Canvas can also access the data itself. So once you pull in an image, an external image, you actually can get an array back out of the canvas to see each individual pixel, which opens up the possibility of not only reading those pixels, but also manipulating them. So you can read them and kind of, for instance, one example I've done is work out what the average color of a particular image is. So by naively going through every single pixel and then just averaging what the color was that I found. Quick demo of that. Unfortunately, I have to reload for that to happen. So this all happens client-side, and then it uses CSS transitions to change the background color. So all of this, just pulls each individual image into a canvas, works out the average, and then just writes out in JavaScript the transition for that. Fairly cool stuff. I did a server-based version of this particular thing ages ago. This was actually my experiment to do it purely client-side, which involved sending an image URL to my server. The server then uses, PHP and ImageMagick to work out the average, and then send back as a JSON little fragment what the color was, and doing all sorts of crazy things. Now with Canvas, I can basically just do that completely client-side. And for things like, I don't know, simple little effects that you want to do on your page, it could be quite a nice, simple thing to do. You can do more complex manipulation. You can read out the pixels and actually do quite artistic stuff if you wanted. A good example I came across ages ago is Close Pixelate. So this is basically just reading out images and then creating patterns out of the color data that it finds inside the images. There's an interactive version, but it's not really optimized for smaller screens, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But go and have a look at that. Interestingly enough, this was an image, but somebody took it off Flickr. So what you see there is the manipulated image that Flickr gives you back that says, this image is not available anymore. And here's the Flickr logo, all changed into kind of weird shapes. So yeah, you can do kind of quite gratuitous effects, but it's all completely client-side, which I think is quite exciting. It opens up new possibilities. Now, the interesting thing is with that, is that as we've seen, with Canvas, you can feed it an image that's currently in the page. You can also point it to a video element that's currently in the page. And what happens at that point is it will take whatever the frame of the video is at that point in time, and it will pop that into your canvas. And then from there on, you can do exactly the same kind of pixel-based manipulation that you would do with images that we've just seen. So opens up the possibility of doing things like, if I just close this, really naff things like you've got a video running on one side, and you can actually, on the fly, make a version with Canvas on the other side, or obviously if that was the point, you would lay it on top of it, and grayscale it for one really naff example. Or you can basically manipulate those pixels, and this is triggered basically on that event that fires when the time updates on a video. So simple things like that, or similar to what I did with images, trying to work out what the average color is. Don't know if you've ever seen these Ambilight TVs that have got the LEDs behind it. So as you're playing something on your TV, it actually lights up the wall behind it. Same kind of thing. You can have a video playing. Don't know how well that will show on those screens. It's very faint. Once you get the slides, have a look. It kind of lights up the sides here of the actual video element. And it uses SVG as well, and kind of opacity and that sort of stuff. Yeah, you can just faintly see it. So again, really simple things, a few lines of JavaScript really behind all of that. And I think it's just very powerful that you can start to do that sort of thing purely with JavaScript, purely with a few lines of code, rather than having to use, I don't know, big, heavy frameworks or something like Flash, or the 3 people that still use Silverlight in the world. Sorry, are they in the room? Sorry, guys. So all of this stuff, is it safe to use right now? Well, big sites are starting to use it. You know, YouTube, they get however many hours every second. Well, every second they get, I think, about something like 4 hours of video is being posted to YouTube. And already, since the launch of WebM codec, they've been doing all this transcoding. Every video that's been uploaded has actually been transcoded to WebM, to MP4. And obviously, they've still got their Flash version for videos that use adverts, because obviously, people, if it was all like video element, people will be clever enough, they fear, to actually bypass the adverts. So anything that's got an advert on YouTube still forces the Flash player. But for other videos, if the user has opted into the HTML5 trial, they'll get an HTML5 video element to actually see videos. Already was mentioned right at the start, so I'm kind of capping it at the end as well. Don't do browser sniffing. Don't do that shit. It's a yin and yang, isn't it? It's beautiful. You should have seen the day I was doing the web search to find an image like that. That's... So you don't want to go back to the old days of this site is optimized for IE, that sort of stuff. You know, nobody would do that nowadays. All of these things, well, we've seen even codecs and stuff that can be feature detected, and you're all conscientious JavaScript developers, or most of you are. So before you use anything, you know, you'd feature detect, does that method actually exist, and everything else. There are, you know, ludicrously simple ways of testing. Is video element itself actually available? Is a particular codec available? So please use them and start to do that sort of stuff. Also for the lazy, there are loads, and this is just one of them. There are loads of ready-made frameworks, micro-frameworks, libraries, plugins, whatever you want to call them, to do, say, things like video players, audio players as well. Sublime Video is quite a nice one. I think that was released completely, yeah, free and unlimited, it says right there. So it's really nice. You know, it's pre-packaged. It also has the fallback to Flash, which looks exactly the same. So it's a nice, nice kind of no-brainer option if you want to start playing with HTML5 video, even on your real-world client sites. You drop that in, and it will give exactly the same experience to you know, older browsers using the Flash version, and new browsers will just get the HTML5 video element. Same thing for audio. JPlayer is one of them. We've heard about Sound Manager this morning as well. So there are lots of these options already out there. And then I'll quickly show some work in progress, because obviously it's great that we've got video, we've got audio, and that sort of stuff. But really, it seems when you start to do video and audio, the ultimate goal is you want to emulate chat roulette, but just in JavaScript, because who doesn't want to get a screen full of somebody's penis? It's great. So that's being worked on, not the penis part, but the real-time communication. It's a thing called WebRTC, Web Real-Time Communication. Basically, to be able to do things like, you know, you access your webcam and sending that particular picture to somebody else's browser and vice versa, doing kind of real-time conferencing and that sort of stuff. One of the aspects of WebRTC is the actual getting hold of the webcam itself and actually doing stuff with it from JavaScript directly, I should add. So it's actually, you know, plugin-less way of accessing the data. And there's been, just the other day, we've had a build for mobile ages ago, but at Opera, just one of the things that we released is a labs build with this actually working. Well, I say it's working. I'll probably have demo fail. So I'll show you two quick examples. So basically, camera access from JavaScript. It's also standardized, so it's not just an Opera-specific thing. We're just, at this point, the first ones that have it implemented on a beta version. Get user media, you can say, I want to access the camera, or if you also had audio, you want audio true. That's not supported yet in our version. Success and failure kind of handlers. And what you get is something like this. So first of all, well, there's a UI, because obviously accessing the camera, all of that kind of stuff has privacy implications. So that's one of the things that's currently holding up a lot of these developments. Similar to what you might have seen for geolocation, where the browser first asks you, do you want this site to know where you are? This is even more important. Do you want this site to actually access your camera? I'll allow it. And hopefully, yes, beautiful. So this is like, it's not using Flash, thank you. And obviously, it's going over canvas, and you can actually do effects with it. I obviously didn't code this because it's cool and clever. No, it's a colleague of mine. He's taken, it already existed, this kind of exploding images, and he just hooked the camera into it. So the world's loneliest chat roulette there, but without my penis. Not yet, anyway. Beers later. Not, you know, you can make nicer things like a photo booth kind of application. Let's see if that works. That was written by a colleague of mine, so I can do like. There we go. Fantastic. So you can do quite cool stuff, and we released that the other day, and we said to people, you know, if you're doing any demos, play around with it, and within like an hour. Basically, a guy came across here and kind of completely blew any of our demos out of the window. He's also he's using Canvas, but then he's using WebGL because he's got ready-made effects. So again, real-time JavaScript, yes, with WebGL. There you go. It's beautiful. So I find that quite exciting, that these sorts of effects are now possible, are basically within reach of somebody who's just doing a bit of JavaScript. Obviously, you need to know what you're doing. And as a pièce de résistance, it'll probably fail completely. I played around with it the other day, thinking I should really show a demo myself. Hopefully, if this works, but QR codes, for the 5 times when you get QR codes in your life, hang on, let me just find a bit. Hopefully, if it finds it, which depends on lighting and all sorts of things, because I stole the script that actually does the capture. Yes, there we go. So this actually, again, uses video, and then it tries to find, not a script that I made, I just nicked that off a website, that basically analyzes the image data and tries to find, is there a QR code there? So obviously it needs loads more work, it only grabs that image there. But as I said, I think that's quite nice. Obviously the use case of I take my laptop around when there's a QR code isn't quite there. We have got an older version of this, this functionality in a labs build for mobile, but hopefully this updated version will come to another labs build on mobile as well. I've played around with an early one that we haven't unleashed on the public yet. It kind of works. So you can actually go around with your mobile using JavaScript to read QR codes. So as I say, I just find that, oops, where am I? Oops, there we go. I find that quite exciting. There you go. So camera access, that, and the scariest picture you'll ever see. So all of this stuff, we've seen, you know, we've got video, we've got audio and everything else. And a lot of people, particularly in the tech press, have kind of, as soon as they've seen video, they're going on about, oh, this is like the Flash killer. HTML5 is the Flash killer. Is HTML5 going to kill Flash or not? Well, we've seen some movement already with Adobe dropping official, discontinuing support for Flash on mobile devices, which is probably understandable. Their hand's been forced a bit. But really, when I play around with HTML5, all of this stuff, I don't really see it so much as a Flash killer or not. It's not a question of HTML5 replacing Flash that really interests me, because there is a lot of good content still out there on the web that is not going to get updated to use the latest, coolest HTML5 stuff. But it's not about replacing Flash, it's more about giving developers a choice. So as with any other technology that's out there, your client comes to you, your boss comes to you and says, I want to do this particular functionality. You have to evaluate all of these tools. There might be situations where Flash is still the right tool for the job. I mean, if you want to deploy something that uses the camera in all browsers right now, you want to access the webcam, Flash is the only game in town. You can't expect everybody to just install a labs build of something that has the latest, coolest technology. So it's really about, it gives you more options. If you want to use stuff like that, you can. It's now possible, rather than immediately having to say, well, I have to use Flash for anything that's whiz-bang, kind of video, audio. There are now ways of doing it if it's appropriate for your project. And with that, I'll say thank you very much. We got time for questions? Or?
No, but we will find this time.
That's the right answer.
That might be a stupid question, but you said that WebM is open, yeah? Mm-hmm. It's developed by Google, not a VP8. Yeah. So my question is, if something is open now, can be closed, let's say about 3 years from now? About legal issues. Okay, every browser starts using WebM, and Google now say, okay, you have to pay us for it. Is it possible?
I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a copyright lawyer.
So you don't know?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, then. Use animated GIFs. I think that's the answer.
You've shown the example with video being live transformed on a canvas.
Yeah.
Isn't that a use case for a hidden video element?
You know what? As I was playing that, I was thinking, oh, maybe that's the case. It could be. It would actually be worth testing. It should be possible, even if it's not in the page, to actually get access to the video data. So yeah, good point.
One thing which you haven't mentioned related to audio. From what I know, there are also some specification being worked on, giving some multi-channel audio browsers, right? Mixer audio.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's also something which will be coming in the future, right? So if you mentioned some JPlayer, I think. So if you use Sound Player, the guy who created it. Mm-hmm. He was also trying to implement multi-channel audio. He used Flash for now because he couldn't do this in the other way. But what's coming is also some filter effects which you can do on the audio. So it might be useful. It might be that one day, all this online audio streaming will be done purely by browser.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's I think there's currently 3 competing sound API type things. I've seen great demos with Firefox showing like live audio, beat analysis, and kind of doing animations based on the beats it finds. It's all very, I would say, flaky in terms of it's a bit unstable at the moment because, as I said, there are 3 or 4 or whatever different specifications because obviously the geniuses at Google have a completely different view of how it should be done, and they sometimes have that not invented here kind of syndrome. But yeah, it's all moving that way. I mean, there's already talk about, well, if we can do that for audio, why can't we do all the cool filter effect directly for video as well? So I think we'll see a lot of movement. It's definitely where a lot of clever people are putting a lot of time and effort into. So yeah, it's likely that we'll see even greater stuff in a few years' time.
Okay.
Why do you think it's now? I mean, we had videos on web pages since quite a time. And what is the event that you think had the most impact on implementing this right now?
I think the desire to have a video element similar to an image element has been there for quite a long time. I think I have to check, but I think it was like 98 or something like that, where I think Lauke from Opera actually proposed the video element on one of the HTML mailing lists. I think the event that now has brought it to the attention of everybody really was how certain devices not supporting Flash have forced the hands of the market and the developers. And as these devices are very popular with the cool high-tech developers, it sped up artificially that particular process. But, probably for the better, but it could have been handled in a slightly different way, I think. So, yeah.
Is there an easy way to add subtitles to the video or change audio of the video to support different languages?
Oh, yes. You could split it up. You could have, if you wanted to do a ghetto solution, you could have a video without any sound or a video that's muted, and then have separate audio elements, and then with JavaScript trigger which one you want. There's currently being, as we know, HTML5 itself is now currently evolving, HTML5, the living standard, which is an absolute nightmare. But a new thing that just came out recently was support for video groups, or no, tell a lie, media group it's called, where you can have multiple elements, but all effectively hooked up together. You need to name them the same media group, similar probably in a way that you'd have radio buttons having the same kind of group, so they're mutually exclusive. And then there will be new API methods to basically switch quickly from one to the other. There's also support for subtitles, for instance, in video. I didn't get into that at all, but that's another element that you can put inside a video. So I think these things are kind of being worked on. Some of them seem a bit over-engineered for my tastes, but you could fake it by doing it from basic principles, basically.